Joanne?
Rounds will be Commissioner Vogelsang.
Here. Okay, any changes to the agenda tonight? No. Public requests. We're going to open for public requests. Do we have any here? Go ahead.
Boca Raton. I'm also actually here to speak to one of the agenda items, which is the presentation of the athletic field closures. I guess now's the time to speak before Greg and team, but I also represent SABR. I'm a board member for the Soccer Association of Boca Raton. I just want to say, for the most part, these people are wonderful. They work with us in just about everywhere possible. All three of them here that are two of them here that, but I'm just asking, it's on the agenda. I saw it on the agenda. So I came to just say, I hope everybody uses some common sense. And I know the most important thing with field closures is safety. And as long as safety is at the top of the list, that is what we're all about. We don't need anybody getting hit by lightning any more than the tax district or the city needs. But there have been some times where there was maybe a little bit of rain and there was some question about should it be closed. And even though 90% of our play is on the grass fields, you know, you've got Petrie Park, which is turf fields, and rain shouldn't be affecting that. The city also, we work with them on Sandpine. So all I'm saying is this is an important issue, but I'm hoping that the city, the recreation department, and the board see it as, let's use common sense when we're closing the fields, because we're up to over 2,000 rec kids that have 11 weeks of field usage. You take out a whole week of field usage, because most of them only practice or play one day a week. It can be problematic. So thank you for examining this, and thank the rec team for trying to make this work the best they can.
Art. Anybody else?
Good evening. My name is Harold Chaffee. I'm 6200 Northwest 2nd Avenue. I'm the president of Keep Golf in Boca. I just want to wish everybody a belated Thanksgiving. I mean, we wanted to go to the meeting, and then the car wouldn't start. The battery was stone dead. Then we found out we had no internet at all. It's just one of those chaotic times, you know. We didn't get it for 3 days, you know, so it's just nuts. But I did want to mention that I couldn't understand why they had the Miller Lake information in there. I got confused at first. I thought it was a reboot of what we were going to do, just redo it again. I don't know whether it's just the basics to go over what they've done and completed so we can pay them. Okay. Or we'll go further from that.
The agenda?
Yeah, well, it's in the yeah.
Yep, we'll be discussing it tonight.
Okay. All right. I just hope they don't do anything. You should actually do nothing about it like after the first of the year and have a plan. Because I don't want to go. I don't think we should go before the city council again without, you know, really know what we're going to do.
Shortly.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Is this the last meeting before Christmas? No. Okay. Thank you.
Hey, anybody else? Anybody online? Nobody? Okay, we'll close public requests and we'll do approval of the minutes. The previous board meeting held on November 21st. Joanne,
Approve. Ernst,
Yes.
Commissioner Engel, Commissioner Vogelsang, Commissioner Wright.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Okay, regular business. The first thing we're gonna do is the athletic staff presentation on field closures.
Commissioners, tonight we have Greg Stevens here as well as Kevin Beckman to talk about field closures.
All right, sorry. Good evening, Commissioners, Chair Wright, Council, staff. Greg Stevens, Acting Recreation Services Director for the city. Thank you for your time this evening. In an effort to continue to try to work on reestablishing good communications and a good relationship between the department and the district, we've had great ongoing discussions and relations, talks with Brianne. What I'd like to do from a department standpoint is try to get ahead of things periodically and come before the board and talk to you about policies and procedures. Over the years, there's a number of different topics that'll come up that sometimes people from the public will be upset about or don't really understand the city's policies. They'll come before you, but we never really have a chance to really discuss those with you and to bring that information to you. So hopefully it's just an exchange of information this evening. We're just trying to bring bring this topic kind of before you and explain how and why the department works. So, talking about these various items that come up with the public, obviously the one this evening is to talk about how the city determines whether or not a field is playable after it rains or with inclement weather. So obviously the city and the district spend quite a bit on the athletic fields that we have around town. We spend a lot of time maintaining and preparing the fields. And there's a fine line once it rains on a field of whether a field is playable or not. At one point in time, the city didn't regulate. And over the years, I've seen things everywhere from people taking bags of kitty litter and dumping them into the baseball fields and the puddles to soak up the water. I've seen people take shovels and dig a trench through the infield to the outfield to drain the water. Think that's a great idea. I've seen them take brooms or mops and push all the mud and the water up onto the grass and create big holes, in the baseball fields. And then we also get fine line decisions like teams will tell us between football, soccer, other sports that, hey, but we do need to train, we do need to play on fields when they're wet because we do see these conditions when we're out in our competition. So really, where is that fine line then? What does the city do? And how do we make that determination in order to make sure that the fields are not only safe, but we keep them playable? Because again, there's a fine line in the number of fields that we have and the availability of fields that we have throughout the year. Any kind of long-term damage that can come from playing on a field, if it's too wet, can take that field out of action. Or if that field comes down for maintenance, it can actually mean that field has to come down for a longer period of time. So it's that fine balance of making sure the public has access to the fields, being able to use them, but also making sure they're safe and also making sure that we don't do long-term damage to the field. So at that point, I'd like to turn things over. I have Kevin Beckman from Athletics come up and talk to you about our policies.
Thanks, Greg. As he mentioned, Kevin Beckman, I'm actually acting recreation superintendent. I worked in athletics many years, so I'm pretty well versed on making the decisions. So for some assistance on reviewing the many different aspects of the closures, I thought I didn't have a chance to do a full PowerPoint, but the next best thing, I put it on a Word document. So we'll give some copies to Brianne later in case that you want to review any of this information or if Bob wants to review it. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go over actually some general information first, and then I'll dive into the different protocols we have for closing a clay field, which is a baseball, softball field, or a soccer field, football field, but more so what we call rectangle fields. So of course, the first item is the last thing the staff wants to do is cancel activity, as it's not uncommon to receive complaints from parents and coaches. So, a lot of people think that, we just maybe willy-nilly, but we know that there's, a lot of feedback that's going to come back from, closing a field. So we take it some, pretty important aspects. So contrary to what people to think, it's not an easy decision, as there's many nuances that go into making the best decision possible. Of course, the main purpose of the closing of the athletic fields is safety, as Mr. Turple had mentioned, but we also need to be good stewards of the fields, as Greg had mentioned, to prevent damage to the fields when they are wet. It's short-term and long-term damage that can occur. So as per an agronomist report that actually the Beach and Park District hired back in 2014 to do an assessment on the fields, which was very good, where we found a lot of different information about what we do on maintaining our fields. The agronomist, Dr. Busey, mentioned in his report that there can be short-term and long-term ramifications of playing on a wet field, especially a grass field, as more severe soil compaction will occur, which inhibits nutrient uptake and oxygen, as there is less pore space in the soil. Additionally, per Dr. Busey, the most systematic destructive effect of field use occurs when fields are wet. The consequence is soil compaction and loss of drainage because of that pore space particle has been reduced and compressed together. And when the field is saturated at the time of play, when fields are not puddled but have field capacity, this is a weird technical term that supposedly is a water term, not a sports term. So when that field capacity has been exceeded in the soil profile and fields are partly saturated, that is when games should be called off, or else severe soil compaction will occur. That is per Dr. Busey's report. So that was some good information that we had to take to heart to make sure, again, even though we do aerate our fields, that soil compaction has that short and long-term effect of the fields. We typically start checking fields roughly 2 to 3 hours before the activity starts if there is a rain situation, as staff needs time to check multiple fields at multiple locations. A tool that we've been utilizing in the last 5 years or so are these weather stations that we installed at Patch Reef, Sugar Sand, and DeHornley Parks. That's come into play a lot, and actually a lot of staff will have it on the phone, or you can look at it on the computer. It'll actually give you how much rain you've had in the last 2 hours, in the last 24 hours. That's come into play multiple times, especially on a weekend, a Saturday or Sunday morning. We could have multiple inches of rain on a Friday or Saturday night, and people get to the park and you don't really see that much. You see some puddles, but you don't know that it really rained a lot. By using the rain gauges, we can see if it's rained 1 or 2 inches and take that into effect and making a decision. Reasons that we close fields, as per our youth sports packet document that we give out to the youth sports organizations, they're pretty basic. Dangerous situation occurs, renovations, severe weather, standing puddles. We'll get into more of the, ones that are applicable. Footing is unsure and slippery. Ground is waterlogged and squishy when you walk on it. While walking on the field, water can be seen or heard, or an impression of your footprint is left in the surface. If water gathers around the sole of the shoe, and the last one is the soil moisture meter readings exceed acceptable levels. I'll get into that moisture meter reader that we actually was recommended by Dr. Busey. We use that when that comes into play, when it's, a little ambiguous on whether we should close or not. So we'll get into clay fields first. It's somewhat straightforward, but there's many nuances to this one as well. If we see a large amount of standing water or encounter a large amount of mucky clay, that means there's still a lot of moisture in the clay. I don't know if you guys have ever been on a clay field where it's kind of muck. You might not see standing water. Sometimes people will say, well, geez, you canceled the field or closed the field but there's no water out there. Well, the clay can just have so much more moisture in it. It's just mucky and it's slippery and unsafe. Number 2, if a small amount of puddles / muckiness exists, the athletic staff will try to perform various field maintenance techniques, such as poking holes in the clay. That's where we take a shovel, poke it into the ground, kind of lift the clay up a little bit and let that water drain down, kind of like six inches below the clay profile, raking the areas and adding a moderate amount of drying agent. One thing I want to touch base on the athletic staff and being able to prep the fields, if it rains, if it gets into that marginal state that we can work on it. We are lucky enough to have, great staffing levels for the Beach and Park District to be able to do, especially at Patch Reef, Sugar Sand, and Countess DeHornley Park, on being able to get fields ready. Most other municipalities, they don't have that staffing. They actually, a lot of the sports groups, they have to do it themselves and they don't do it very well. But a lot of the user groups really appreciate that, especially, Boca Little League. So please note there's multiple factors that come into play when deciding cancellation is warranted. How much time is there before the activity? 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours? Is rain imminent? You can see rain on the radar. Is it, coming in? It might be playable right now, but we've talked to the user groups and hey, okay, it's going to be iffy in the next hour or so because of that imminent rain. And of course, is there sunshine coming on? How many fields need to be worked on? There's 6 fields at Sugar Sand Park. So we have to take into account how many fields can we work on with the levels of staff that we have. So sometimes we might only get in 2 or 3, 4 fields that we might be able to get ready for a game or a practice. So we have to take those considerations into play. As I mentioned, is it a game or practice? We tend to give games more priority, practices not quite as much. If there's a real small amount of water, we'll tackle that. But we'll tend to more of trying to fix the clay areas if it's more so on games. Let's touch base on the last bullet there. So for grass fields, as I mentioned before, those regarding the Dr. Busey report, that our staff was pretty knowledgeable about the importance of closing a grass field. And but with the Dr. Busey report, that really enlightened us on the benefits of making sure that we were good stewards of the athletic fields and making sure we didn't have that heavy compaction that goes on. One item of note that I would like to mention before I forget, one benefit of being, diligent on the athletic fields is the Hornley fields. Those large grass areas, we've managed those fields well enough. We have not replaced one blade of grass out there. It's pretty amazing that we've never had to do that. So partly is we were able to have a lot of shifting out there because they're large rectangles, but making sure that we take good care of those fields in many aspects and making sure we don't have excessive play, when the fields are wet. So in doing an initial assessment, various factors are taken into consideration on a grass field. You get how much rain fell. As I told you before, we can, we might observe it if it's just in the middle of an afternoon. We can kind of tell how heavy that rain shower is. We may see standing water. But again, we can use the rain gauges to look at that. How recently was the rain? What is the forecast? Again, is rain imminent in the next half hour? Again, practices or games. And then we have to take into consideration how long do we cancel? 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. So we can, there's different nuances that come into play for staff to make those decisions. And of course, we usually work with the sports groups on trying to figure out what may work for them on their scheduling. Maybe some games are more important than others, things like that. So if we think there's been a good amount of rain and there's, the easy indicators don't exist, as I mentioned before, standing water, things like that, we utilize a moisture meter. I'll pull it out here. This is what, again, Dr. Busey recommended. So it's this. I hate when I walk around this, people think I'm carrying a rifle or something. So it's just a mechanism here that has probes that goes into the ground, into the soil profile. And then it comes out with some different numbers. We had to do a lot of testing over probably 6 months to a year to figure out what those numbers are that relative to here to where we think, okay, that's at that level to whereas we think that, there's too much moisture in the soil profile. So we'll use this again, if that's in that gray area. So if we'll go to the next screen, I think we actually list the different processes that we have for the moisture meter. So what we'll do is we'll take multiple readings. I'm sorry, go back up a little bit, please. So we'll take multiple locations or multiple readings at different locations at the goal mouse and a couple other ones in the center of the field area. If more than 2 areas have readings of 28 or higher, then we'll decide to cancel the field for 2 hours. If a reading of 35 or higher exists, which is, I mean, pretty much as if it was a recent real heavy rainstorm, then we'll close the field for 4 hours. And then we have some different other protocols, if the readings between 28 or 35, about reassessing the fields, because that's always an important thing. Because we maybe receive more rain, we might not, it may rain, it may dry out, it may not, especially if it's at a 35, we're not sure if it's going to dry out in a couple hours. So again, if the readings are borderline, is at that 28, which is our minimum level for cancellations, we'll, especially if it's going to be sunny out, then we'll probably allow games to be played if it's right at that 28. I mean, that's why would we cancel games for that? Now, if it's a 30 or something like that, and we've got a bunch of games, then we're going to probably look at doing some cancellations. So that's pretty much everything in a nutshell. Hopefully I didn't bore you guys too much with all that information. Anybody have any questions or comments or concerns?
No, thank you. That was very informative. And just to let you know, like, the fields are absolutely beautiful to play on. My kids play on them now. I've played all over the country, played at every single park here in Boca, and they're absolutely beautiful. So thank you for all the hard work that you do and all the staff, the work that
Staff
they
does a
do.
good job.
Yeah. And then in terms, I totally, I mean, it's just such a bummer when things are canceled. Like, I have to say, as like a parent, it's like, oh no, we're not having practice tonight. But I totally understand why, and it's to keep those fields nice and not having to replace a blade of grass since they've been done that's testament to the fact that you guys keep them well maintained. So thank you. I have no questions on anything. The one question I do have is on the phone, when you call the field conditions hotline, it groups a bunch of fields together in like the first group. And I know, yeah. And then is Patch Reef separated out separately now, or because if it's a turf field, so it's a little different, or it'll just say,
It's still included in there because we still have the clay fields.
okay,
So, but yeah, the staff, it's grouped really according to our kind of really zones of our staffing.
yeah,
Sugar Sand is one, and then the other one is, Patch Reef, FAU, and DeHornley, because the group of staff, manage and deal with the
those
field
similar
closure.
locations.
Correct, so
Okay,
they know what to do on
Okay.
closing that.
okay. And then if the clay fields are closed at Patch Reef, it'll say that specifically and say the turf fields are open. Because we've never played over there, so it doesn't.
Yeah, I
I've
mean,
never
we
listened to it.
really won't put it on there if a field is open. We only
Okay.
put something that's closed. And we
Okay.
never close the synthetic turf fields due to excessive moisture. It's only
Right,
really a
lightning.
lightning situation.
yeah,
Because that water percolates through
Yeah.
so well.
okay. Okay, go ahead.
Sure.
When you say a field after a season of, say, Sabre or our top soccer, how long does it take for maintenance after that?
Anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks.
Okay.
Some fields are a little bit longer, depending on kind of really the age of the field. Woodlands Field is a little bit older. We've got some soil challenges there. But usually I would probably, on average, I would say 12 weeks.
And I have to say, Anthony comes over and fills in holes for us
Yeah.
after
He does a
Yeah,
lot then.
he
all
does.
those
He
other things.
he really helps us out. There are no weather stations at Woodlands or El Rio.
Yeah, because they would have to, we don't have internet capabilities there.
Okay. No internet. When it does rain, are the maintenance staff informed to tell us, to call the coaches or call the administrators at those particular fields to say, hey, you got to get off of there because you're going to damage the fields?
We should be having staff at the field locations. Yes, if they are closed, because yes, some people maybe don't call the rainout number or what have you, and still may try to go out there. So yes, we'll be out there if that answers your question, and make sure to keep them off the field.
If we're in progress for a game day and it starts to really pour and it's not lightning, these kids don't want to come off the field.
Yeah,
So-
usually if it's actually during the activity, it would have to rain for a decent amount of time and be
Okay.
a pretty heavy rain for us to, say, hey, get off.
Okay, that's good to know. And do you have the same protocols for safety for the clay tennis courts?
I can't speak for, you're talking about the staff like at, whether it's here or at Patch Reef.
Well, Patch Reef's hard court, so,
I can't speak to those protocols.
because that can get slippery and if it's really wet,
Yeah, I'm not sure. We can look into that though.
would you do that?
Sure.
And I have to compliment Kevin. If I ever email him at 6 o'clock in the morning, he's already at work.
You do email early. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Guys, thanks for coming down. I think you did a spectacular job in keeping up in good top shape. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Is there an issue with people that wander onto the field and are being either closed for maintenance or closed for weather? Because a couple of times I've been down to the Horn Lake and, father walks up, with a couple of his kids and he's got a soccer ball and they put on cleats. Why, I don't know, but they do.
Mhm.
So is this an ongoing problem?
Yeah, we've always had to deal with that. We'll have, especially at DeHorley, we'll have wet field, or I think it's say closed due to wet conditions. We'll have those signs that we'll put out. People still go out there, even they'll ignore that. During our annual closures for rest, rehabilitation of the fields, we have field closure signs and yeah, unfortunately, people still go out there. That goes on really all over the place. That's Greg can attest to. Many different times we'll go to a field. This is not to pick on soccer. That people will use field close signs as soccer goals. So we've actually came up with what I would term some stern language signs out there instead of just, because unfortunately the people would just go out there and play on a closed field until they got kicked off and there's no ramification. So we've beefed up our language on the signs to kind of, make them think twice.
Right, thank you. I appreciate, again, thanks a lot for everything that you guys do.
Sure.
Much appreciated.
Is it possible can like a family go out there though, when it's not raining, just on like a normal day, if the fields aren't closed, are the Rangers going to ask them to leave if they're just playing on the field?
No, I know that'd be a future topic that Greg may want us to talk about is our open play. I know there's a little bit of misconception on open play. We have a huge amount of open play out there at the Horn. Huge amount. If the field is not scheduled, if it's not closed for maintenance and you're not requiring lights, it's open play. Now, granted, we did institute something some years ago. If you have more than 11 in your group playing on the field, we say that you need a permit, because what we would get is we would get groups from outside of the area or even inside the area that come out there and play on the field in open play, which, would produce a good amount of wear on the fields. And as Greg will attest to, I've told him many a times, is that the local municipalities, and maybe you've dealt with traveling to different soccer areas, they don't allow open play. Like the county, you can't step on the field without a permit.
Mhm.
So Delray, Deerfield, Pompano, they don't allow open play. So those people will gravitate to here to do the open play. So that's why we had so much of it. We wanted to kind of restrict some of that larger group of open play. But yeah, people just coming out there and kicking the ball. Yeah, there's nothing
So
wrong
if people
with it.
ask, so it's, you generally want to keep the group around less than 11 people playing in the group. Just because I get asked a lot, like saying, can I go kick around out there? I'm like, well, I don't know.
If there's no permits, now granted, there's another layer to that. We don't want them on the outskirts of a permitted field. We've had issues with that, whereas people say, well, geez, this little area is open. Well, it's just a little area on the side of a permitted field to where there's user group's going to come to us and say, hey, this group is in our way and stuff like that. So we
Mhm.
run into a little bit of that out there at DeHornley.
hmm
So we kind of have to kind of nip that.
Okay,
in
so
the
as long
bud.
as the field is open and it's less than 11 players, you're good to go.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. Oh, and then Bob is on the phone. Bob, do you have anything?
Yes, I do. Am I, have I been unmuted? Okay. Well, Kevin, you can run, but you can't hide.
He knows the
I
moisture
appreciate-
meter.
Yeah, I appreciate everything that you said. You know, the one thing I know is that is that the original Boosie report that you were referring to?
Yes.
Okay, I mean, the interesting thing is the hours usage that he was suggesting. We far exceed that on the DeHornley fields, and there's two reasons for it. One is the way you rotate the fields, and I think two, the way that the fields were built, which leads me to my next question is, you know, I believe there's probably, you know, a difference in when you could allow play. I would say the Woodlands fields as opposed to DeHornley, simply because of the way they're constructed. And who actually makes the decision on whether to close the fields because of weather related events like the rain? Is that something that comes to you, or is it delegated to someone on site?
It'll usually be the supervisors that oversee those parks. And sometimes, rare occasions, maybe if it's a weekend and there's not a supervisor on duty, and if it's a afternoon on a Sunday, it might be a part-time staff member. But 95% of the time, it's usually a supervisor or a full-time staff member.
You know, I know you've been very responsive whenever I've had a question and had to call, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate everything that staff is doing. And by the way, Sabre appreciates what staff is doing also, in addition to Little League. I think we have much larger numbers, and there's a lot more for you guys to do to work around with the Soccer Association. I was unaware that anybody was using your signs out there for soccer goals. That's creative, but certainly I hope that's pickup rather than any of our.
Oh yeah, it's not the Sabre groups are great with that.
Yeah.
That's the problem with them.
Yeah, I just want to compliment you on how things have done at DeHornley. You do a fantastic job out there rotating the fields, and there's hardly a time when both fields are put down. And even after, and they get a lot more aware. I'm referencing the Boosie report. I think you'll find that there's a lot more hours on those those four fields, because there are two in the north and the south side are actually a total of four fields. It's amazing what work you can do. The one thing is that, and I think Aaron brought that up about Patch Reef. When those grass fields are closed, it would seem you could still be playing on those artificial fields there. I know you don't want people on the baseball fields, but do you also close the artificial fields after a rain?
No, we never have. Now,
Okay.
granted, you know, if Sabre gets rained out and you're looking to move to another location or somebody else, in rare occasions, we've moved somebody to Patch Reef, but in many instances, Patch Reef would already be scheduled with another
Yeah.
user.
Yeah, and I think to Sue's point too about swim and racket, you know, clay courts are, you know, you wet those and roll those in the morning, but you know, they do get. We're redoing those now, are we not, Brianne?
Yes.
Yeah. So that should help a lot, because the compaction on those eventually does cause them to get a little slippery. But thanks to you and Greg for coming this evening. And I let some folks know that might be interested in your field closure policy, and I'm sure they're looking in. I didn't hear what Mr. Turple had to say, but I'm sure it was just complimentary about what you guys do. And, you know, I think the issue with Hurricane Nicole, the fields were closed for a couple of days. And we really didn't get much of that rain event down here. And that was what I mentioned that to Greg, to pay particular attention to when the storm itself is, not affecting us as it does other areas, to take that into consideration. And then on parks that are like Patch Reef, that are unaffected by that, I hope that you keep those gates open so people can recreate on those artificial surfaces. But thanks very much to both you and Greg. And I do hope that the title that you have is interim is removed, because both of you are highly qualified, and I'm certainly no one else in the recreational community countrywide knows as much about our facilities and our programming as you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. One thing I might add before, I don't think I mentioned this, many other municipalities have called me and asked about that moisture meter reader, because they want to use that as a tool. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of judgment factors that come into it. So by using that moisture meter, it can take some of that, guesswork out or whatever. It's a little bit more concrete that they can justify it. So. Anybody else?
It's Craig.
Kevin Beckman, right?
Yes,
It's not
correct.
Beckham.
No,
I gotta
I've
tell
been
you,
called many things. Well,
yeah, no,
sometimes
Kevin,
called Kevin Bacon, Beckham, yeah, whatever.
well, Kevin, you're well known within the people of the soccer leagues because they know your name. I never really met you before, but I don't recall, but I will tell you, they know who you are. And
Yeah,
so
hopefully for good, mostly good things.
it's generally good, the folks, it like a lot of people here, they come to us if they don't get what they want. So the two complaints I've always got is, why is the field closed? It's nice out, and you mentioned the structure, and I know the scope of this meeting is field closures, and I don't think anyone can say the fields in Boca are not nice. They are beautiful, and that's what you described as the fine line. So the fine line is, do you have nice fields that no one plays on, or do you have nice fields that people play on and it satisfies the needs of everyone? And so God bless you for taking that fine line decision.
Tough balance.
You're never going to make anyone happy on the whole thing. But I also kind of guide is, err on the side of that, if you got a parent with a child and they want to play somewhere, that's always disturbing when they call to complain that they got kicked off a field or it was a bad experience.
Sure.
But it's a fine line judgment call. Good news, I haven't heard any complaints more recently of anything. So you're doing something really well when you don't hear about it.
It's all a timeliness situation with the rain. The perfect rain would be in the middle of the night,
Right.
never during the day or on a weekend.
So to that spirit, the things that are out of scope that I guess I would say not the topic of this, but I'd like you to give some consideration to is, what can we do as self-improvement for scheduling? And maybe you got plans on these things as well as communication. And, the whole dial-in phone number to me is archaic. So, I mean, what would be really nice is an app that says Patch Reef Field is open, but the baseball field's closed. Something is instantaneous, because the problem here is not that the field is closed for the right or wrong reason. The problem is the communication, because by the time someone drives here with organization of their teammates or whatever they're trying to do, they've all spent time, money, gas that they would have never done. And then they're in a bad spirit when they find out the field is closed. So I know for me, I would be happy to invest in giving you whatever money is needed to get some kind of simple app so that the community can just say it's closed.
We've looked at some different, there's pros and cons. As we talked about before, there is the rain out number. Sometimes for some reason, the groups might not notify them of that. But we'll look at that again.
It's out of scope. It's out of scope to your topic
Yeah,
today. I'm just saying, give it consideration.
Sure.
that might, alleviate some of the concerns. So scheduling is always kind of a challenge, and the communication. Those two things are areas that I think you combine with the outstanding fields we have. It's great. And it is worthy of noting that each field is different. They're like kids, you can't compare Countess to Hornley to Rutherford Park and Rutherford Park to, Woodlands. They are just so different,
Sure.
and so it makes sense to kind of move them around. And then you have the FAU fields and you address the FAU fields, which I appreciate, because I was wondering, how do you control what FAU does? I mean, they got 3 different fields over that, 4 different ones that I know of, and they're all different. You know, but they're part of our 2 of them are part of the circuit of things. so.
Actually, yeah, it's the game field is kind of the main one, and then the 2 glades fields. So we just deal with the 3.
Yes, that's right. So they're all part of our community of fields, and thank you for supporting, you know, what you do. It's we're here to support you too. So
Yeah, thank you for your support.
So I've been informed that the scheduling is going to be discussed at a later date. So I've had the opposite experience with the phone line. I think it works great because I always call right before I leave, and I actually call on the way. Twice usually, just to be sure, because if you leave your house and you're 20 minutes away, you call halfway through, sometimes it can say, no, sorry, it's canceled because the lightning alarm has gone off. So you could just turn around. So it's actually, it works well for me. So I don't know. I mean, if you can find an app that, you know, I get so many texts every day that it's like I'm lost in the text. I mean, a phone call is just really easy. You get an immediate thing right away. I know my button is 1 because Spanish River is right on there as number 1. And you know, as long as the programs relay the information to the participants and they know that's what they're supposed to call, then I think it works pretty well. I mean, a lot of the parents don't know about it because they don't pay attention and they don't read the WhatsApp messages or whatever it may be. But once you get the hang of it, it's really easy, you know, to call and things like that. So if you do find an app that works really well for another municipality or something like that, I think that's worth looking into, but the phone line does still work really well, I think.
Sure.
That's just my opinion on it. Sorry. So is there anything else?
Aaron, can I make a
Great.
comment?
Yes.
Yeah, just to echo that. I mean, you mentioned, I think some of the teams that, especially in the competitive leagues, have the WhatsApp, and I know that they will send out a message to everybody when there's field closures. And I think people are now getting the hang of that field closure number. I've almost have it memorized as I've called it so many times, but and it's updated pretty regularly. So I think that if there was improvement, it certainly would be helpful. But I think that once people become accustomed to making that call, I think that a majority of the division reps in our program have that number and will let their teams know that that's the case. I don't know about other programs that have the issues like that, but I think I just got a text from the president of Sabre who said that they were happy with the dial-in phone system of field closure. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Just in closing this evening, good evening, Bob, Commissioner Rollins. Just wanted to thank you on behalf of the city and the department. It's a lot of what Kevin's talking about, saying, you know, we are well staffed, we are well equipped, we are well supplied. We have options that a lot of other cities and counties don't have because of the support from both the district and the city. It's amazing if you really stop to look at things throughout the years. We talk about tonight, it's not an easy process. It's something people may just stop and think about, hey, this is an easy decision, but we understand that a field closure impacts a large number of people. It's just as easy for us to say, hey, the fields are open. We're not going to upset anybody. Come play on the fields. Whatever happens, happens. But we're trying to, like you said, work that fine balance in between. You know, the process that goes on throughout the year, you know, baseball fields, not many other places. We rototill the clay. We add an additive into the clay. The fields are laser graded for drainage. You don't see that almost anywhere. That's a common practice that we do throughout to keep those fields draining in a good condition. We have the equipment to aerify and keep the drainage on the soccer fields, or the rectangles as we call them, but also the ability, when we first designed and laid out Countess Hornley Park, there was not the original thought that we were going to paint 25 small soccer fields out there. But the time and effort that it takes to have the people to be able to rotate those lines and move them back and forth in order to not wear those fields out is, you know, unprecedented really in recreation in the area. So we appreciate the support from the district. So thank you all very much.
Okay. So number 2 on regular business, the Boca Chica Conceptual Master Plan, next steps, Brianne.
Commissioners, on page 5 of your agenda packets is the scope of services that we had from our original Miller Lake contract, which provided for 13 different tasks that they were completing along the way. We got a little bit to task 12, and then the board liked the conceptual master plan, and we kind of moved forward with that. So there's some remaining work left in task 12, and then of course task 13 is not there. So we have about 64,000 left in our contract with Miller Lake. So we're at a point where we can start looking at the next steps. We could finish this out and let them continue putting together the 3D models and all that. We can stop where they're at now with this particular part of it, and we can amend their agreement to start the design work on the east side. Obviously, the west side is a little more complicated because of the ownership and the bond and things like that. So I want to, when I say we, I'm talking about Jacob, myself, and Sam are working through some of that stuff so that we can start the process of putting together the RFP for the P3s, but it's going to take a little bit more time. So in the meanwhile, we can amend this agreement with Miller Lake, and Jacob can talk about that process, but we can amend this agreement to get them started on designing the aspects of the property that we are going to fund to develop and operate and maintain.
Yeah, and if I may, just to follow up briefly on what Brianne indicated, we have had a number of conversations with her over the past week or 10 days as to the next steps with regards to Miller Lake. As she indicated, they haven't fully completed the initial scope of work, but they are pretty close. We've gone through the list, which is included in your backup. Our current agreement with Miller Lake does provide a mechanism to amend the agreement to either increase, decrease, or otherwise modify the scope of services. It does provide a written amendment, which if this board wanted to move in that direction, we'd bring back an amendment to their agreement for you all to consider at some future moment. But really, as Brian indicated, we're sort of at a crossroads to some extent with regards to the project and looking for some further direction as to how you'd like to move forward. We do have a number of tasks yet to be completed under the current agreement, which is certainly an option. I think Brian indicated that we are starting to think through the framework of a public-private partnership RFP and how that would look before putting in the time and effort and expense of going through the process of putting pen to paper and drafting and working with your staff to do that. I know that Brianne wanted to have this conversation to get a sense from the board as far as what direction that collectively the board wanted to go in. We're obviously standing by, both Sam, myself, and the rest of our office to assist with whatever course the board decided to pursue.
Just for clarification too, I don't think we need a motion tonight or any, and Jacob can weigh on that, but more direction as far as.
Just some direction, and ultimately, depending on the nature of that direction, we would work with Brianne on an amendment to bring back to the board for future consideration.
Anybody have anything?
Sorry, one more thing. Just as a reminder, we do have money set aside for the development of this park. We have 7 million in our budget this year. So we are in a position to start the design work on the aspects that we are going to build.
Steve?
So just for clarification, we're just talking about moving forward on design on the part of Boca Chica on the part of Ocean Breeze that we own.
Recommend starting right now until we figure all the other stuff out on the west.
Yeah, I'm in favor of that. I would like to get together with the city so that we can get started on moving forward with the design on the west side. But for the time being, let's do what we can do, which would be working on design features for the east side of the property.
Greg?
Okay, this is kind of complex. Here we are, December 2022, and it's gone through a lot of the process steps. So we have to become realistic of what we can do and what we can't do. And while the conceptual design was approved by the city, this is a board who I think we're all anxious to do things and get things going, but we can only do what we can do. And there are other factors in play that I don't know. I think we're a very transparent board of what we're doing. And we're very forthright in supporting what the community and what volunteers want to do. Unless there is a dramatic change on the city's part of saying embracing, you know, a change at Boca Chica, and I mean the word embracing, you know, from starting with the city council to embrace doing something important and something that will really make a difference. And I look to you, Greg, because you're the representative of the city here, and I know your heart and soul is in our parks and stuff. And on behalf of this group, I think our entire group, our heart and soul is in these parks. And, you know, I got to tell you, I'm not forgetting standing in front of city council and saying why we need a golf course, and saying, no, that's too expensive. No, that's not right. And it comes back to transparency. And then the city gets a golf course. Hey, well, God bless them. They got a golf course for free. Okay. But it's not cheap. It's not done. It's got millions of dollars going into it. And I'll be the first to say, I don't know what other plans the city has on different things because it's about the transparency. So all I ask for in this group is transparency, that we do what we can do is transparency. And for us, we can do what we can do. So I think the opportunity is for the community to do something great out at Boca Chica. And I think Miller Lake put together a terrific plan. And I am, for one, happy that and delighted that Aaron did a phenomenal job of delivering it and getting their conceptual buy-in. But I suspect we're back to the same thing that when we bought this property is, yep, good luck, go do it. And then whatever we do, we wasted our time and effort on. So I can't support doing anything that's not something that we have full control over because it's not our property. And right now, the Boca Chica, even though we bought it for the community, the west side is technically titled in the city's name. And there's restrictions on the way that our bylaws are. So let's focus on what we can do. And so I think what you're asking for, Brianne, or suggesting is a good discussion. So I think what we can do, you know, that is good is focus on the east side. And I would specifically focus on the northeast side to say, let's just focus on that one quadrant. Let's narrow our scope of stuff and get what we can get done. And that's up to the city. We're on the city's timeline. You know, we'll give them a phenomenal plan. We'll give them all the components of a terrific, you know, first piece of things. And it will be a beautiful addition to the community around there. But that's something that we can deliver. Alternatively, we could put dirt trails in all over the place and give you a crappy finish that no one likes, but that's not Boca, and it's not the fields that we have out there. And, you know, I, for one, would love to have the city, you know, take care of that area like they take care of other areas, but we have to cross that road when we get there. So unless there is a desire by the city to move forward on anything, I don't think we can do anything. And if that's the case, you know, I'm being transparent and honest here. So my recommendation would be is amend the Miller Lake agreement to implement the northeast quadrant, which is the area that we own. And it's the community garden, the playground, the dog park, the BMX trails that are all through there. Let's do that first class and do it nice. Reserve some space for future facilities. Reserve some space for parking off of Jeffrey, whatever comes out of that. And let's get going on it, and let's hope and pray we can do that within 2 years. And I think that's only if the city wants to do that, but we can at least move forward with that piece.
I agreed with a lot of what you said in terms of the transparency with the city. I think city council has been pretty transparent. I think it's more administration that is not as transparent with us. And I hope they will be more so on their future plans, because that kind of leaves us in a lurch almost. When we don't know what they're doing, how are we supposed to plan what we're doing if we don't know what they're doing, right? So, but I think doing the northeast corner is a good idea, but I also think doing the southeast corner, including in that, obviously not the P3 that's there, but I think including the trails to connect to that northeast quadrant, because we know we're doing that anyway, to include that in the piece of the design, I think would be a good idea. Especially for the people who are living in Boca Chica in that quadrant, having it in their backyard. I think moving that ahead would be a good idea to include that. Go ahead.
I wholeheartedly agree. Because look, the survey said, what we did statistically said trails is what people want. So let's move forward with it. So the trails connecting on the east side are fine. But I want this place to be a very robust landscape, nice, and the devil's in the details to make it wide, trails so it's comfortable walking. It's going to be nice. Leaving room for whatever the P3 is for the different, field house and pickleball center, that would be terrific. That's just down the road.
And I think working with Miller Lake on this design will go really well. They're very communicative, and we've seen their work at other places. So I think it'll go well, and I think there will be a back and forth with them on this. So go ahead, Susan.
I like your ideas. I did ask Sam at a previous meeting about looking into the bond and the considerations with the bond as far as developing the west side before the bond is paid off. And has anything
Yep.
been done?
We are still looking at that issue. I know we have it on our list. It's something we're continuing to research. Yeah, we do have that. I don't have an answer for you this evening, but we are looking specifically at that issue.
I think that's really important for us to know as far as going forward with our RFP and what people can be thinking about as far as a timeline and how to proceed, because I know people want golf, but if we violate the bond, that could be a disaster for us. So I'd really like to get that. I love the idea of doing the trails and keeping it safe. I in the RFP, Brianne, I'd really like to have security as one of the primary considerations, not just the design, but the security on how to keep people who are on the trails safe, but also the members of the community.
Well, I jump into here is that I certainly think that Craig and Aaron laid it out there pretty clearly that we have control over that the east side, and that may be our best option to start showing what we can do for the community. At the same token, I don't think we need to put the west side, up on the shelf. I think we need to continue to look at that opportunity. I recall Mayor Singer said that there's three things that we should do over there that we do very well, and that's golf, trails, and bike paths. And I don't think that we can forget about the folks that came to us. The folks that have been talking to us about golf far outweigh anybody else has talked to us about trails and bike paths. And I think that we have to respect that and do this in tandem. As far as when we pull the trigger to actually make it happen, that's one thing. But I think that we can certainly explore the options on the west side at the same time where we're going full bore with the east side, because it's going to be difficult to do both at the same time. But I do think that we can still examine how and what's the best way to put golf on the west side. I don't want us to forget about that. The folks that have been to us, Keep Golf in Boca, Greg Galanis, we've all heard all the reasons why we should have that over there. Now it's a matter of how do we get that done. And I understand the anxiousness of folks wanting to get something, start moving some dirt. And Craig and Aaron's idea is a good one, but let's not forget about the west side.
Yeah, and I think Brianne and the attorneys are moving ahead on that as well, trying to sort all that out for the west side.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So is that it? Yep. Anybody else have any more?
Just for clarity and Jake's sake, I mean, I realize he said you don't need a motion, but I'm happy to make a motion to give direction for the chair and the executive director to work with council to amend the Miller Lake contract to facilitate the build out of the east side in a phased approach. With Bob's point, I'm not gonna take it away, is it continue to explore options on the west side.
I was going to second their motion, Craig.
You can still second it?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Joanne,
Commissioner Ernst? Commissioner Engel? Commissioner Rollins?
Yes.
Commissioner Vogelsang?
Yes.
Commissioner Wright?
Yes.
Motion passes.
okay, do approval of payroll and invoices, Craig?
Sure, Madam Chair. We have a very large amount for approval. And before I mention that, I just want to give feedback of why we have it in there. So in today's agenda pack, there's over $5 million in payments due. And so the two largest payments for the group is to be aware of is our September O&M operations and maintenance budget with the city. It's $2.585 million. So it's a lot of money that we're contributing back to the city to have the outstanding fields. And the other, we have the bond service, which is in there. The other significant one I'm bringing to your attention is our CRA payment. This year, the payment is $2,310,749,000. Okay, and that is my understanding. You know, as we looked at this thing, the CRA was a community redevelopment agency with a fixed time that was supposed to end. We have remaining years of 3 more years. It's set to sunset in 2025, which is at the expectation that it is going to sunset. The community downtown has been redeveloped. We've talked before about the 2 legal agreements that set forth why the district is participating in it, and why we also propose that we're not sure that we really should be participating in it, since district people are not allowed on the tennis courts downtown. Is that my understanding? There's else that's changed. Is our district residents not allowed to, do they get any benefit to being on any of the recreation fields on the city campus there? Okay, well, I mean, if we're going to contribute 2.3 million, it's just an open question that kind of begs fairness to residents. It's not many. Do you think anyone's going to use it? I don't think so, but I just call into question the amount spent. And so it's a pass through. We can continue to bill our residents for all of it. But we're good stewards of our money, and we like to make sure that it is on its path. And I assume the CRA will eventually sunset. So that said, the total amount that we're going to disperse, you know, forthcoming, and it will come when it's due, is $5,185,112.06. And that is a significant portion of our normal spend, but I'm recommending that that amount be approved for payroll and invoice.
Second.
Just have one comment. What's the 6 cents for?
That doesn't deserve an answer.
Commissioner Ernst? Commissioner Engel? Commissioner Rollins?
Yes.
Commissioner Vogelsang? Commissioner Wright? Motion passes.
Okay, reports and discussion items. Brianne,
Commissioners, I sent out an email last week that the tower project went out to bid, and I want to thank Greg for really pushing on that. I know he had to have a lot of conversations to get that out. So the project is out to bid. We'll hear back in January about that. The roof bids for Sugar Sand Park Community Center came back in on Friday. We have CGA evaluating those. We hope to have that on the next agenda for a recommendation. And then I also heard from Ellen at the libraries today that the materials for the Little Free Libraries arrived early. So they're actually going to get those Little Free Libraries going out sooner than we expected. So that's exciting. As soon as we have the dates that they'll go in, I'll send that out. And I don't know if you guys have ever had a chance to check out the Friends bookstore at the downtown library. Parking is a little bit hard hard right now, but the Friends Bookstore has a lot of great used books there. So if anybody needs books for any reason, I'm sure that they have it there. So, and I highly recommend it.
Take donations as well.
They also take donations, and I'm sure you'll see some of those donations back in the little free libraries.
Prior action will work with your executive director to amend the Miller Lake contract as needed, but of that aside, I have nothing to report this evening. Thank you very much.
Anybody have anything? Susie?
To go along with what everybody is saying about our relationship with the city, since Greg and Kevin have these interim positions, I wholly agree that you guys are doing a great job. And there's been a more relaxed communicative feeling that I've had as far as everything that we've been doing. I did have the opportunity to have coffee with the new councilwoman, Fran Naklis, this morning, and she is determined that we are going to have a really good, smooth relationship going forward with the city council. So I'm really happy about that.
Guys, thank you very much for your presentation. I really do appreciate everything the city is doing, and the city is spectacular, from a lot of things that's going on. So the infrastructure, and there are many things to balance. I understand that. And so I think your communication, Greg, just sharing things with Brianne has gone a long ways. Thank you.
Steve?
I have nothing, but I do have a future agenda item. A friend of mine, a fellow by the name of David Ogman, has a son who's disabled. And he made mention of the fact that he literally had to travel hundreds of miles to find a park that was, I want to say, disabled friendly. And I'm not talking about ADA approved, but has some of the facilities that a wheelchair bound kid can use, or people with children with other disabilities. So I would like to put him on the agenda to speak at our first January meeting, January 3rd. Yeah, and that's it. And thanks again,
You
guys.
just need his contact information.
Oh,
after.
sure. Thanks again.
Anything?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I supported the earlier motion around the east side, but I don't want us to forget about, I don't feel the necessary to make a motion because we're still investigating how we can do the east side, but I don't want to neglect that in the process of moving forward on something more substantial for the east side. Secondly, Kevin and Greg have been with the city for a long time. I've known Greg since almost since I moved here in Boca, and have worked with him in many capacities. And as Susie said, the relationship just seems a lot more comfortable and more a partnership than ever before with those two gentlemen in the roles that they currently serve. And I do hope that the city recognizes the asset that they are, and will put them in that position permanently. And finally, I'm listening to Craig give his report on the Treasury, and I can't tell you how lucky we are to have somebody with his skill set monitoring our finances. And Craig, thank you. You're doing a great job, and I think we're in stronger position with you there than we ever have been. And my thanks to you for everything you've done in that capacity. People don't think about how important that is, but when you look at the money that we have and how it's spent and how it's monitored, thank you. Once again, you're doing a wonderful job. That's all for me, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Bob. Okay. I think the only thing I wanted to say was that the city is having the parade, the Christmas parade, on Wednesday evening. I believe it's at 7:30. It starts. The holiday mile is before that. If anybody wants to run a mile. But besides that, I have nothing, so. We need a second.
Second.
Joanne?
Commissioner Engel? Commissioner Rollins?
Yes.
Commissioner Vogelsang? Commissioner Wright? Motion passes.
We are adjourned.